So a few months ago I made a video analysing some of Murray Gold's themes for the Doctors, and it did pretty well, and a fair number of people asked for a follow-up, so this time I'm taking a look at some of his companion themes. If you've not seen the original Doctors video, then you might want to give that a watch before this one, as I'll be calling back to some of those pieces. There's a link to it on your screen now. But without further ado, let's get stuck into some Murray Gold companion themes. When we first meet Rose at the beginning of the series, she is a young woman treading water. She feels no sense of purpose or drive, she's just going through the motions. That is until the day the Doctor crashes into her life, and it changes forever. Her theme begins very hesitantly, almost growing in confidence and certainty in itself, mirroring Rose's character journey throughout the series. It utilises this stripped-back instrumentation, mainly consisting of piano on a bed of strings, before those strings rise up and take centre stage for that melancholic melody. There's a real sadness to the theme with those stark piano chords, but also a wistfulness, as if Rose is yearning for something more, something better, which she finds with the Doctor. It moves from 4/4 into a 3/4 waltz time, a time signature and feel that Gold uses for several of his companion themes. It's a really emotional composition that is used for many of the characters' most defining moments. The closing moments of the end of the world, the hologram scene in the Parting of the Ways, her last goodbye with the Doctor in Doomsday, her reunion with him in the Stolen Earth, and for her appearance in The End of Time. Interestingly, this last one was originally meant to be scored by a reprise of Song for 10 that Gold wrote, but Judy Gardner insisted that Rose's theme was used instead. It's even used for Mickey's departure in The Age of Steel, putting much of the focus of that exchange on Rose. In many ways, Martha is a very different character to Rose in our introductions to them. Where Rose has a job she doesn't care about, Martha is a medical student on track to build a career for herself. Rose's family consists of just her and Mum Jackie, whereas Martha has a big family full of siblings, both parents and parents' girlfriends. Something they both share though is the inability to resist that tantalising opportunity to go off and see all of time and space. Martha's theme shares a lot of similarities with The Doctor Forever, beginning with a solo vocal line and strings, then building to incorporate other instruments, this time with electric piano also incorporated. The two pieces are even in the same key and performed at a similar tempo, with very similar melody lines at points. However, Martha's theme is a lot more gentle and soothing, and whilst it does have some nice heroic and dramatic flourishes, it stays as a very smooth, flowing piece throughout its length, and adopts a more hopeful, reflective tone. And where the Doctor Forever moves back and forth between time signatures, Martha's theme stays in 3/4 for the duration. It feels very inquisitive and soulful, and we get these cheeky blues note run-ups. Before we rise up into this beautiful section, with the vocal line underpinned by the strings and brass, which shares some melodic similarities with Song for 10. Unlike Rose's theme, which was used relatively sparingly throughout her tenure, Martha's theme is used in almost every story of Series 3, and for her return in the Sontaran two-parter and The Doctor's Daughter. From her first appearance in The Runaway Bride, we are introduced to a very bold, bolshy, at times gobby character in Catherine Tate's Donna. Despite being completely unafraid to speak her mind and often clashing with the Doctor, the two obviously adore one another, and this cheeky, at times brazen attitude is particularly apparent in her main theme. Donna's theme is a very fun, bouncy piece of music, accentuating that larger-than-life character. It's very slapstick sounding, fitting for the episode that it first appeared in. The piece is driven by its plodding double bass line, with jazzy flourishes from piano, strings and brass, and of course that very over-the-top main melody to give it a kind of rumba feel. It features lots of accidentals, which are flattened and sharpened notes to give it that funny, comedic sound. Halfway through we get more of a polka feel, with the syncopated accents in the bass line and the jazzy brass, keys and woodwind lines. This theme gets a revamped version for Series 4. It's much the same theme but with more of a percussive element and a fuller arrangement compared to the original. We get a bit more of a bossa nova feel with this version. It's generally only used for fun or comedic moments, which some have suggested makes it weaker than the other character themes, as it's lacking in an emotional depth. However, the main leitmotif is used in all three of the 60th specials featuring Donna, but in a much more subtle, restrained manner, showing how the character has matured and grown since her time with the Doctor. And for the final episodes of Series 4, Donna gets a duo of heartbreaking pieces that score her two equally heartbreaking fates in Turn Left and Journey's End respectively. The Dazzling End uses an orchestral rock instrumentation, with a simple bass line and these electric guitar chord stabs creating a descending line cliché. The guitar and bass double up to create this constant pulse along with the drum beat. Then there are these gorgeous string lines continue to build in dynamics with more parts being added in, growing even more majestic until its conclusion, both tragic and triumphant, with Gold wanting to convey both the salvation and sacrifice of Donna that unfolds in the episode's conclusion. I saw someone say that Gold wanted this to sound like a Muse song, though I can't find a source for this. I do think that the band's sound is definitely an influence, and it works really well for the scene that it's depicting. For Donna's actual goodbye, we get another orchestral rock instrumentation that first starts with these painful electric guitar chords and eerie whistling, reminiscent of Doomsday. We get a percussion line kick in, symbolic of the fate that is marching towards Donna in her final moments with the Doctor. Melancholic strings rise up. It's sad but also triumphant as we see all of Donna's greatest moments in one final montage before everything drops out and we're left with a heartbeat before a piano and strings coda that seems to echo the Doctor's theme, perhaps mirroring the Doctor half of the Dr. Donna leaving her, along with all of her memories of him. Series 5 is often described as the fairy tale season, with the story of Amy and the Doctor having several parallels to that of Peter Pan and Wendy, and that tone is also reflected in Murray Gold's score. First meeting her as a little girl, the Doctor becomes an integral part of Amy's life, even in his absence, and that imaginary friend and childlike sense of wonder lives on in Amy through to adulthood. For Amy's theme, we return to the vocal, piano and string instrumentation of Rose and Martha's themes. It has a very sweet, fairy tale quality, perfect for the character of Amy. The main section has this feel of a lullaby, helped by that gorgeous vocal lead. It intentionally shares stylistic similarities to Rose's theme, as Gold says in the liner notes for this season's soundtrack album. In the same way that in 2005 Rose's theme didn't evolve until she had travelled and been changed by the Doctor, so too Amy's music speaks about leaving home and experiencing the wonders and magic of the universe with the Doctor by her side. Around 2/3 of the way in, we move to a slightly darker section, utilising the piano arpeggios from the Madman in a Box, but with some of the notes flattened. I think what's happening here is a switch from F major to F minor, but if that's not the case, I'm sure that someone with much better music theory knowledge will be able to correct me in the comments. Interestingly, this piece wasn't used until The Beast Below, in the post-title scene of Amy floating in space, and despite this being her main theme, there is one that is more frequently used and more commonly associated with her. First used as a theme for the child version of Amelia in the 11th hour, this theme would crop up a lot throughout her run on the show. Again, Gold doesn't hold back with the fairy tale vibes, glistening chimes and lullaby vocal melodies over a soft bed of dreamlike strings, really homing in on that childlike innocence. The first section is again in 3/4 time at a nice steady tempo that feels as though we're drifting, swaying in the breeze. Whenever I hear these first few seconds of the track, I can basically hear that soft rattle of the windmill in young Amelia's garden. Then, after some ominous chords, we get the repeated descending scales that begin to build, getting higher in pitch. As with the Madman in a Box, it uses these cascading piano melodies that evoke that sense of falling down the rabbit hole, or perhaps a little blue box falling down to earth. Something to note is that this, Amy's theme, The Madman in a Box, and I Am the Doctor are all written in F major or D minor, so there's a lot of melodic and harmonic crossover between them all, which I can imagine is incredibly helpful when transitioning between leitmotifs or composing full suites for these episodes. Clara, especially in her introductory season, is a bright and shining breath of fresh air for both the Doctor and the audience. Over her time on the series, she evolved into a much more complex and nuanced character, but at her core, that sweet, honest curiosity remained. Beginning with a repeated piano arpeggio, we get this very sweet woodwind and strings melody dancing over the top. It's very light and breezy. Again, we're in 3/4 time, and we've got a cute kind of waltz feel to the theme. Some Redditors made the link between this theme and the bridge of the track Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Similarly, this little chromatic build to end this section reminds me of Let's Go Fly a Kite from Mary Poppins.
Send it soaring.
I think both are very fitting, as this is a very storybook, Disney-esque motif. Of course, Clara's theme actually turns up as diegetic music within the show in the episode Hell Bent, when the Doctor plays it himself in the diner. With this electric guitar version giving this song a really nice, mellow folk feel, like it's accompanying a story around a campfire, which is essentially what Clara is to the Doctor at this point, a memory that has become a song. When we meet Bill in Series 10, she is instantly endearing. Her character is charming, inquisitive, and unapologetically human. She forms an incredibly strong bond with the Doctor, and the care that she has for him and the rest of the universe always shines through. Bill's theme unfortunately doesn't have an official version, because there is still no official Series 10 soundtrack, almost 8 years on. Come on Murray, please. So for this analysis, I'm primarily using the original version heard in her debut episode, The Pilot. The piece is written in A major and has this very bright, happy, optimistic sound to it. We begin with a nice playful piano melody with some accompanying percussion. Before we move to a playful bass groove that has a very distinct Latin feel to it, which I think is due to a couple of things. Firstly, the instrumentation of the guitar, bass, piano and percussion. Secondly, the accidentals played in parts of the melody. Giving it that cheeky quality that's so in line with Bill's character, also reminiscent of Donna's theme in parts. And finally, and I think most crucially, is that tresillo rhythm that the theme is pretty much all based around. In the more stripped back sections, we can hear the inclusion of a female choir, also reminiscent of Martha's theme, which I think shows the deeper soul of Bill's character, that honest and thorough sense of care that she has for everyone. One section I really enjoy is the possibly slightly cliche build with the strings and the bass, moving up the scale underneath that repeated broken chord. It's a very simple addition, but I just think it's really nicely done. I also love the live version from the Series 10 finale countdown Q&A, which feels like a much more orchestral and cinematic arrangement of the theme, with much more emphasis on the strings and woodwind, and it sounds very John Williams in parts, particularly this section here. It's just a gorgeous piece of music. Like I said, the Series 10 soundtrack. Now, please, Murray, please. Ruby is a bright, exuberant character that at times seems slightly wise beyond her years. Having grown up with her mum fostering babies, she has developed a maternal side at a very young age. When we and the Doctor meet her, she is at a time of questioning, in search of the truth about her past, and contemplating some of the quite complex and difficult questions that brings up. When Ruby's theme was first unveiled at the 60th anniversary concert, it was described as
the gorgeous sounding waltz,
and it is certainly that. Another companion theme in 3/4 time, Gold completely leans into the waltz feel with his music for Ruby, writing a very classical inspired piece. To me, it feels particularly inspired by Chopin and some of his slower waltzes. It's almost sad that the episode Rogue didn't have more of a focus on Ruby, so that we could see this theme play a bit more of a substantial role in a story set in that Regency period, where it feels like it really belongs. It's interesting that for such a youthful, bubbly character such as Ruby, we get such a sober, melancholic, quite mature theme. She could have had something more in the vein of Clara or Bill's themes, but this piece is actually perfect for Ruby because it delves beneath the surface and finds what is underneath that vibrant, optimistic exterior. The theme is written in G minor and has a very sombre tone. There's a real poetic sadness to this music, like a beautiful tragedy, which is what I think Russell was going for with Ruby's story in relation to her being a foundling and yearning for the truth about her birth mother. It all centres around the piano as its main voice, which is typical of classical waltzes, as we gracefully glide up and down the scale, supported by the strings, brass and woodwind, which all add a sense of the serene to the music. I really love those tempo changes and chromatic runs up the keys. It gives the piece a real dramatic grandeur and the whole thing flows really nicely. Of course, this is another piece that makes it into the diegetic music of the show, this time played by Ruby herself. In universe, this is a song that she wrote for a friend going through a breakup, and we get to see her play it in a lovely sequence from The Devil's Chord. And there we go, a little bit more Murray Gold music analysis for you. Thank you to everyone that requested this, that watched the original video. Thank you to everyone that's watched this video. If you would like to see another instalment of this, I'm toying with the idea of doing some analysis on some of Murray's villain themes, potentially looking at some of Sega Nakanola's music from the Chibnall era, but let me know if you would like to see any of that. If you have enjoyed this, please give it a like, subscribe, share it around and all of that good stuff, and I will hopefully see you again soon. Cheers, bye.